So I will invite Dr. Bohara and Dr. Samrat Kunwar to start the next session on climate change.
Thank you, Sakib. So anyway, so this session, now we are 7:01. I think we have all three presenters, and Dr. Kumar is the co-moderator. Just like before, we'll have 10 minutes each, and then we'll have moderator give comments and also collect the question from the chat and have interaction. And we would like to end it by 7:45 so that we can have about 5 minutes break. So with that, I'd like to invite Anup Kumar Saha, a water security in Bangladesh, a case of China-Bangladesh Teesta project.
Good evening from Bangladesh. Am I audible? Can anyone ensure?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Let's give us a bit time. I'll share my screen. Is this visible? Is this visible?
Yes.
It's okay.
Yes.
Okay. Thanks. So I am Anup Kumar Shah. I'm an MA student in international relations at the South Asian University, New Delhi, India. So my research paper is titled by Water Security in Bangladesh, a case of China-Bangladesh Teesta project. As all of you know that the Teesta river is a transboundary river in between India and Bangladesh. Is under negotiation, but the interesting fact is that China is going to invest in the Teesta river to resolve the water issue in Bangladesh. So my research topic and my whole things is based on the water security in Bangladesh and how this project is going on. And what I actually did is that I just evaluated the Teesta river, Teesta project in China-Bangladesh Teesta project from the lens of water security. You can say it, I judge it, I evaluate it from the lens of water security. So actually what I did in my abstract says that water security, as all of you know, that water security is fairly a new concept in the field of security studies, and the Teesta river in Bangladesh has been experiencing water shortages over many years, and recently China has attempted to resolve the Teesta river. So the study actually attempts to examine the efficacy of the China-led Teesta project on the Teesta river in Bangladesh from the lens of water security. So the literature review that focused on the K demands that I put down in my PPT. So as Sangeeta Thaplial note that the water was introduced into security studies. It's both threat, national and human security, and but it also is leads to conflict between states. So what I focused in my literature in the efficient utilization of water resources, because the economic growth, standard of living, political and social stability, and water becomes an issue. How it becomes an issue? Because the ever increasing demand on water sources and their management, water management must be understand in terms of demand and supply, and understanding the water crisis, because a water crisis ensues when supply falls short of demand, owing to water supply and demand, that what Jan Selby outlined in his paper actually. So that doesn't mean that water security means water scarcity. Water security means to ensure the supply and demand based on the availability of supply and demand of the peoples, and and how water becomes a source of conflict or threat. That gave some example from the Middle East, and that Ralpha Salmi outlined and draws the dots between political and water discourses, and stated that water crisis will remain if the political issue is not solved. And then water crisis is circumscribed by political strife or stake, and that the most the thing that I got from the literature, that academics in South Asia tend to view water as either a development strategy or a bilateral relationship, And most research in South Asia on water security has focused on political discourses, that not in the people-centric perspective. Water is a vital issue for security analysis to study, not because of the propensity to cause war, but because it has an impact on everybody's life. This is how my literature I got from the different authors' paper on water security. So my research question is the following questions will lead this research. My first lead question is, to what extent is China's involvement with Teesta project reflective of achieving water security for Bangladesh? What are the water security concerns of Bangladesh? In what ways China-Bangladesh engagement will help achieving this goal? What does Teesta project tell us about China's interest in Bangladesh? How is the case of Teesta water project instructive for understanding Bangladesh-China relations? My hypothesis was that the Teesta River Comprehensive and Restoration Project led by China, Bangladesh, to be a decisive factor in Bangladesh water security. And what my aims was to assess the Teesta rivers and the Teesta River basins water security concerns. And my methodology was qualitative. It will be using discourse analysis, that you, as a technique, that you will know that discourse analysis is a representation of the text. It's a textual analysis, and I tried to analyze water security more of a critical perspective, and we try to understand water security discourses around the Teesta project in Bangladesh and China. That I collected my data from the newspapers, because there's nothing much, actually nothing is there in the journal articles. That's why I just take some of the data collection from the different newspaper, national and different newspaper from the national and international sectors. And my conceptual framework is that I write my conceptual framework more of a critical ground, so that I first thinking of the water security context, that since the early 17th century BC, water security have historically been connected controlling the availability of water, the major point of conflict and order. Suppose Jordan River, for example, watershed, and Falkland Island conflict and the subsequent Persian Gulf War, for example. So the water security perspectives. So the water security perspectives, why I am writing my water security perspective, because what and in what ways water gives a perspective to study water in security discourses. And that I focused on the understanding how water has got into a key component of a state's internal security is important for national security. For instance, you can say UNESCO, the US Environmental Protection Agency, and the US federal law define water informs us more about the state-centric characteristics. In the 1990s, the subject of water came under the human security, and how individuals can access water for their daily demands. That UN framework-based conference that stated on. And then come to the disciplinary debates on water security as a way of narrating human survival and lives. Various theoretical contributions have contributed to bringing water into security discourses. Suppose you can say concern for social, political, economic, and environmental security. The important and very interesting and very instructive things that I got from that water security has discussed in the security discourses, along with environmental security. And then come to critical water security. What critical security actually says: water in a critical approach examines a huge spectrum of connection between individuals and communities concerning water resources. Critical security studies have informed the comprehension of water security, which has had an impact on understanding issue from a lens of human development. I again say that critical water security is connected to human development. It's a human perspective. Not a national perspective, not a state-centric perspective. Then water security, the supply side. An important development regarding water security in the supply dimension has to do with the water security. Water supply sufficiency refers to having enough clean, affordable water for drinking, washing, and sustaining one's livelihood. That means that the supply side, because supply side becomes very important, because supply side means the supply efficiency. How much water is there or how much water is not there, that's the whole thing that I conceptualize in my conceptual framework. and water security in South Asia. So water security in South Asia, that like over the time South Asia experienced challenges, plenty of serious water-tight issues, including extreme water shortage for potable and irrigation, and South Asia is deeply rooted in human development. Water security in South Asia, which can cast a long-term and regional growth, as well as state that bring a considerable level of security, because water security in South Asia is very vulnerable, because we know that in South Asia.
Anup, you have 2 minutes remaining, just letting you know.
Okay, so then I move to water and food security, how water has become interconnected with food security, and then I go to the water and sustainable development. It actually talks about the sustainability, how sustainability is focused on water, particularly relevant to South Asia, water in economic, ecological, and the social needs. And water and societal security, how it connected to the individuals in the society. Water as economic security, how it connected to the crux of the quest for progress, sustainable development, and evading poverty. And the case study, that's the major attraction in my thesis or my research paper, that China-Bangladesh Teesta River project, that already says that that I am saying that water security in Bangladesh, that what China and Bangladesh are talking about in their project, from the lens of water security in Bangladesh, and the importance of Teesta River in Bangladesh, that 40% of the total irrigation land and all, like it responds that Teesta River has become a vital resource for the basin's people well-being and resistance. And China-Bangladesh relations, as you all know, the China-Bangladesh from this triple is not very quite good, but the end of the 2010 or 2020 is nowadays is good. And China-Bangladesh over the Teesta is very tragic, because there is a lot of things that the Bangladeshi internal politics and the domestic politics is also involved in the China-Bangladesh India-Bangladesh relation over the Teesta and the Teesta River Comprehensive Management and Restoration Project to address the long history, and they are investing 24 billion worth of memorandums of understanding, and the MOU to celebrate to collaborate in the water sector in Bangladesh. So they conducted a feasibility study, submitted a master plan based on the Teesta River, and water security through the Teesta River Comprehensive Management Project, that I found that the water security is therefore related to the human security, but despite the fact that water is necessary component of human security, all states should be making water flow management a major priority in order to protect water for human survival and maintain long-term sustainability. And assessing water security lessons from China-Bangladesh Teesta project. So this is my fourth chapter, and let's come to the main discussion and whatever it is when we analyze is that water security over the China-Bangladesh Teesta project. The long-running Teesta deal is now being negotiated, as all of you know, that the China-led Teesta plan has granted considerable attention in the national debate. And in order to get a broader understanding water security discourse analysis from the report that I already say have been done, that all the discourses that I have found from the different newspapers, that it's not that's not preferable to the China-led Teesta plan, that both of the countries that are talking about and going to invest on the Teesta River. And above all, the consideration that water flow becomes a key imperative for Teesta River water security in Bangladesh. So if China through the Bangladesh did not ensure appropriate proper water flow, China would the possibility of an invariably diverse interest in Bangladesh, because China's TRC MRP is concerned with achieving water security by ensuring adequate.
We're out of time, Anup. You want to wrap it up?
Just one minute. Just my conclusion. The study, that's my results or conclusion, whatever it is. The study concludes that water flow have become a prerequisite for the supply sufficiency in order to overcome the water crisis in the Teesta River security. The TRC MRP's China-Bangladesh engagement will hardly have any chances of achieving this goal. There will be an underlying vested interest in China's involvement if the Teesta River project does not ensure continued security. That the China-led Teesta project is incompatible with the Teesta River's water security, because the Teesta project overlooks the significance of water flow in terms of supply efficiency, which counts as a delusive composition in the Teesta River water security. Thank you, sir. Thanks.
Okay, so we move on to the next paper, Bindu Ghimire.
Good evening, sir.
Good morning.
It's from Nepal, so good evening from
right.
here.
Sounds good. Go on.
Is my screen visible, sir?
Yes, it is.
Yes.
Oh, thank you, sir. This is me. Good evening, everybody. This is me, Bindu Ghimire from Central Department of Microbiology, Tribhuvan University. Today, I'm going to present on characterization of extended spectrum beta-lactamase producing Escherichia coli from Bagmati River, One Health approach. Hope this is a little bit of organism that is related to the medical term. I would be explaining in a very simple way so we all could understand it. Let me start outline of the presentation. I'll be starting with introduction, methods and methodology, results, conclusion, recommendation, and acknowledgement. Introduction: antibiotic resistance has become a very global problem, and WHO has declared antimicrobial resistance as top 10 global threat. The antibiotic resistance in an organism develops when an organism will become no longer susceptible to the drug that is used for its treatment. Millions of deaths has been recorded due to antimicrobial resistance, microbe infection, and in 2019, 4.5 million deaths has been recorded due to antimicrobial resistance infection. And only Escherichia coli is the organism that has accounted for 200,000 deaths. And this antimicrobial resistance organism, they are not only limited to the hospital settings, but this resistance organism, they are found circulating in the ecosystem, that is air, water, soil, human and animals. For this, the WHO has emphasized on One Health approach, addressing the interconnection in between people, animals, plant, and their shared environment, where ESBL E. coli has been taken as indicator organism. ESBL means extended spectrum beta-lactamase producing E. coli, where E. coli, it is a commensal organism that is resident in our human gut, and it is also pathogenic as it causes the various types of disease. And it can produce extended spectrum beta-lactamase, an enzyme that is able to resist the antibiotic that falls in the category of third generation cephalosporins, cefotaxime, cefazidime, and ceftriaxone. And this ESBL EC, they are resistant to carbapenems group of antibiotics also. And in this scenario, there has been a rapid report and articles where the water pollution in Hindu Kush Himalayan region countries are being reported. And in the similar trend, the Bagmati River that flows within the capital city of Nepal, it flows within the human settlement, and it has been polluted with all the kinds of sewage and garbages. This polluted water is known to harbor the antimicrobial resistance organism. They are known as a zone where this antimicrobial resistance organism can share their gene to different groups of organisms. And these types of resistance, they are not only limited to the polluted water, but the same types of resistance is seen within the animal and the clinical settings. Still, the guidelines and policies are formulated in Nepal for mitigating the problems of Bagmati River. We have got National River Plan and also Antimicrobial Resistance Action Plan for National Plan for Antimicrobial Resistance has been developed. We have National Treatment Guidelines also. But still there are records of antimicrobial resistance from poultry farms, clinical sample, and water within the Nepal. But the single study or comprehensive study that is lacking, which will be suggestive for antimicrobial resistant strain and determination of ESBL, is lacking in our country. Thus, this study was conducted to find the ESBL EC from the environment, clinical, and animal source, and to characterize it from the river water also. For this, a cross-sectional study was done from January 2020 to December 2020. For the study area, Bagmati River and its tributaries were taken. Also, the water from spring sources like stone spots and wells were taken. Samples were collected from poultry farms and the tertiary hospitals. Ethical consideration, a consent letter from the poultry farm owners were taken. The ethical approval was taken from National Health Research Council, Nepal, and also later from the National Department for National Park and Wildlife Reserve was taken before the sample collection. For this, water sample from river and spring were collected, fecal sample from the chicken, and urine sample from human were collected. All the samples were processed at microbiology laboratory of Central Department of Microbiology, Tribhuvan University. And there we just identified and tested for antibiotic susceptibility. ESBL detection and confirmation was done, and molecular typing was conducted. The sample were analyzed with the help of SPSS statistics and exploratory software. All the isolate has been preserved in the glycerol for further study. From this study, we just found 12 different types of isolate from clinical, water, and chicken fecal samples. And from this, what we found is that we have the very different types of, or the highest amount of isolate were obtained from clinical samples. And we saw the Escherichia coli, it was the highest isolate, accounting for more than 50% of the isolate from all the 3 samples. And the organism, they were highly significant correlation. And when we tested the Escherichia coli for 8 different types of antibiotics, it showed the highest resistance to ampicillin, that is the penicillin group of antibiotics, and less resistance to the imipenem, that is the carbapenem reserved drug category. And then they were, and from this, what we observed is that the highest percentage of resistance was shown from the chicken fecal sample, showing the highest amount of antibiotic resistance. Then we conducted the cluster analysis, and in this, through the cluster analysis, the antibiotics were grouped into 3 clusters. First one is the ampicillin, that is the penicillin type, and next one is imipenem and nitrofurantoin, and other categories were in the second group. When we conducted the similarity matrix of the sample on the basis of antibiotic susceptibility test, that is the resistance pattern of an E. coli, the resistant pattern of the E. coli that was obtained from water and the chicken fecal sample were similar rather than the clinical sample. When we determined the multi-drug resistance,
it is one of the major humanitarian challenges in the 21st century. If we look at the figures, globally 23.3 million new displacement cases takes place every year due to disasters triggered by natural hazards. If we look at figures from India, an average of around 3.6.
And when we talk about the multi-drug resistance, an organism becomes a multi-drug resistance when it becomes resistant to more than 3 categories of the drug. And the E. coli that was isolated from chicken and water sample, they were 100% multi-drug resistance, and from the clinical samples, 50% were resistant, multi-drug resistance, and ESBL E. coli were isolated from the water sample in the very highest amount. And again, for the confirmation of the test, we just detected the gene of the E. coli, BLA CTXM and BLA TN gene. All the 2 types of gene were present in the fecal, water, and clinical sample. And these they give the suggestion that all the strains are almost similar type, carrying the same types of varieties in the clinical, water, and fecal sample. Thus, it is concluded that there is a significant association in between the indicator organism E. coli in environment, human and the animal sample, and the circulation of multi-drug resistance and extended spectrum beta-lactamase E. coli is found in the community. And if it is not addressed timely, it may be a threat to the public health system. It is recommended that antimicrobial resistance surveillance should be strengthened, and academia should continue research related to the antimicrobial resistance, where the funding agency and universities should have the very good collaboration. And for mitigation of the antimicrobial resistance program, antimicrobial resistance problem, which is also known as a pandemic, a very silent pandemic, a One Health approach is very appropriate and approach. Thus, I would like to acknowledge and thanks all my team members, University Grant Commission Nepal, Central Department of Microbiology, Tribhuvan University, all the conference team members for their participation. And thank you so much. Thank you so much, and hope despite the rising trend of this COVID infection, again, we all will be adopting the safety measures for ourselves. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. I think we'll have a comment section towards the end, as we said. So the third presentation is about the migration, agriculture, climate change using the Ugandan case. by Yuanhang Wang of Texas A&M.
Yes, so can I start in time?
Yeah, you have 10 minutes.
Okay, I'll try to make this like quick since we are running out of time. So can I share my screen right now?
Go ahead.
Well, I cannot really share because the other the presenter is sharing his.
Bindu, can you yeah, can you remove your screen sharing?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Hi everyone. So this project is about the interlinkage between the climate change, agriculture, and migration, and using the evidence from the Ugandas. And this presentation is basically about a 6-part motivation, discussion, data, methods, and results, and conclusions. So the motivation is that in the 2020 meeting, the 2020 meeting of African Union, that the policymakers were trying to set the rural to urban area migrations at a natural rate, so that understanding how the climate change, like the effect, how that affect on the migration is very important for us, because like people migrate for different reasons, and why they migrate is very important. And in the sub-Saharan Africa, that sometimes that migration rate could rise or sometimes it could decrease, and we are not clearly sure about these reasons. So we hypothesize that the extreme climate change would induce migrations, and we also hypothesize that climate and migration relationship differs by different types of migrations. For example, you might migrate for like employment, for work, and you might just simply migrate for marriage, and you might move to a different for like study in a different school. So, and it also might differ in socioeconomic status and demographic status, and crossing household and individuals. And we tested our hypothesis in the context of Uganda, and if a person, now based on the survey that we defined that a person is a migrant if this person has been away from the household at least for 3 months in the past 12 months. So the data we're using from the World Bank's Living Standard Measurement Studies Integrated Service in Agriculture, LSMS ISA, and the data including the topics of the migrant status and the reported climate shocks and demographics and agricultural activities across years and the waves. It has total 7 waves, and we chose the last 4 waves from 2013 to 2019. That is because that the variable structures are more like consistent in these 4 waves, and then the data are relatively new. And how we define the climate shock that we use in the self-reported climate shocks in the survey. It has detailed like types of the climate shock, including like flood, droughts, and extreme temperature, irregular rains, and the irregular rains. Irregular rainfalls are combined with the landslides. The problem of this self-reported climate shock is that previously we received like critics about this one, is that it must have some measurement error or some redundancy problem in there, but we are also considering it is another way that how people perceive the climate shock. Because firstly, that we were expecting that the farmers or the peasants in the broader development country that they must have some mitigation strategies on it. And second point for us to reducing the self-reported climate shocks variables is that the farmers in developing countries don't really have too much source about those weather informations. I mean, there's many areas, many rural areas in developing countries that they won't really just using parameters that the USA farmers can use. Like they are not going to use the soil moisture or the temperature or wind speed. They simply just go out of their house and look at the sky and make some judges about next days farming operations. So we're trying to using this self-reported climate change, and we're trying to make some like analysis, and we're also trying to make some validity checks for these variables. And so that we collect the rainfall data based on the rainfall data that is quite like they are actually the climate research unit data. And I collected it from the Center for the Environmental Data Analysis. It is actually the CRIPS data, but the CRIPS data, they have the same source. So we combine those rainfall data with the household, excuse me, with the household data to make our analysis. So the method we use here is the fixed effect estimator, and in this formula that the M represents the number of migrants in a household, and the S represents the indicator of the shocks. And so we run several regressions, and the shocks varies from the self-reported shocks, self-reported climate shocks, and the rainfall variations. And the X represents the control variables that we include in the like household and individual demographics and the income level. And we also assume that exists a household fixed effect. So the first result we can see here is that generally we can see that once a household experienced a climate shock, that there was a negative effect on the numbers of migrants, which means that once you experience a climate shock, then you migrate with less possibilities. But in the agriculture area, which were targeted that once they experience a climate shock, then there are more possibilities to migrate. And when we break down the climate shock, that with the drought specifications, that it has similar patterns, but there's no significant result in these sectors. And when we go into the flood sectors, then we can see that there's no significant effect on that, but we do see that there's a slight significant on the agricultural household which from the flood, and there are migrations for other reasons would increase. And when we compare all the previous results with the rainfall variations on migrations, that the monthly rainfall will not be significant, but it is still not consistent with the previous analysis. So we are saying that the self-report is still like self-report climate shock is still consistent with the rainfall variations, and we do expecting that this variable could work in somehow. And we were expecting to see that the monthly rainfall variables will decrease the possibilities of the employment migrations and other economic reason migrations. So the conclusion of this project currently we have here is that the perceived climate shock decreased migration generally, but it induced migration in the agricultural household. While the perceived drought reduced migration in flood has no significant effect on migration. And as different to the perceived climate shock, objective rainfall variations induces migration. However, the rainfall variations decrease migration for employment and other economic reasons. And overall, we can say the best we can say that the perceived climate shock variables decreases migrations, but it induces migration. Yeah, it induces migration that is originated from the rural area. So as the policymakers are trying to lower down trying to make the rural to urban area migration rate low, that we can see based on the result we have in the hand that the perceived climate shock could increase the migration that originated from the rural area. And then that is basically about my presentation. Thank you, Rob.
Okay. Thank you very much. I think we would like to have all three presenter video on the screen. It'd be good to see Bindu and Saha. So anyway, so what we're going to do the remaining time is to provide comments. So I'll take on Saha's comments. I'll share very briefly, and then I'll pass it on to Samrat. And there are some question from the chat. Samrat, you can kind of take a look at it while I move on to briefly give my comment on Saha's. So I just have a little quick slides. Can you see it?
No.
Oh, sorry. I have to do share it probably first. Sorry about that. Can you see it now?
Yes.
Okay. So basically very quickly, I just wanted to, it's a very interesting paper about water security from 4 different angles he has tried to undertake. But I just wanted to see what this Teesta's rivers issue was in terms of India, China, and Bangladesh. So I just wanted to look at the picture, and so you can see the basin, the community. So that basin is about like 14 or 15% in Bangladesh. So if I remember correctly from the paper, covers about, I don't know, maybe 22, 23 million people on that side, even though this may be about 400-kilometer long. So anyway, it's an important river that you can see comes from border of China and India through Sikkim, West Bengal, and into Bangladesh. So quickly, then the research question, as he already said, I had a little bit hard time understanding the hypothesis, because sometimes whenever you have a hypothesis, it has to be a little bit what I call the crisp hypothesis that can be refuted, right? That can be falsified. So maybe a crisper hypothesis that can empirically be either refuted, even though narratively would be interesting. So, so it looks like throughout the paper, the water security narrative is identified as 4 elements, right? One is the livelihood of the people, as you talked about. The other is the political issues, the balance between 2 regional superpowers, India and China, their role. And the other thing is the financial burden, which is about $1 billion debt and loan issue that local newspaper have, he says, talked about. And then the environmental concern. So those 4 things, the whole idea of the thesis, I would like to see would be to make argument using these 4 elements, providing the data, right? So, so anyway, so the narrative had to do with the those 4 concern, and Saha concludes that the study, the China-led Teesta project is incompatible. Okay, and then he talks about cities' inability to maintain adequate water flow, supply and demand, biodiversity risk, and then the mentioned debt issue also. One of the things I would have liked to see probably for future is it talks about the data collection procedure, but I didn't see much. For example, data on water consumption would have been good along the catchment area, wildlife species and their dependence. Even though the paper says it is very important, it would be nice to see, and there's been some research being done, Teesta water wildlife. So having some sort of a hard data on consumption, wildlife species, farm production, and the up and down of potential uncertainty production, and then displacement of people if the dam is built. And then provide some flooding statistics, right? If the dam were to be done, what would happen to flooding? It talks about a buildup of silt, and then how that might inundate surrounding communities and the farmland. So having a data, and there's been a lot of study being done from an engineering perspective. So citing them and using some of the data would be good. Survey data and some analysis might also not be a bad idea. A GIS map showing this study area would be a nice thing to add to this wonderful paper. And finally, he talks of the textual analysis, but to me, textual analysis is the harvesting of text in the newspaper and all that using some sort of a software. And that could be geared toward text classification, sentiment analysis, and you can use even artificial intelligence or the machine learning to harvest those texts and then create a empirical diagram to prove or disprove a hypothesis. So anyway, I don't want to take much time. Hopefully some of these comments are useful. Over to you, Samrat.
Yeah. So I will quickly talk about the second and the third paper. I don't have a slide prepared, but I'll just quickly give my feedback, right? So the second paper by Bindu Ji, right? So which was about the E. coli paper. And essentially how I understood the paper was that what's happening right now is most of the drugs are antibacterial, antimicrobial resistant, right? So, and one of the reason most drugs like penicillin are not working as effectively is because in organisms like E. coli, they produce a protein called ESBL, right? Extended spectrum beta lactamase, and that is causing many drugs not to function as well, right? And that's a global health issue. And the authors here, they are trying to look at, one of the things they are trying to look at is the relationship between multi-drug resistance and ESBL, right? And so to do that, they looked at water samples from Bagmati River. They looked at urine samples and also chicken fecal matters. Right. So I think the paper was pretty well done. The first thing I'll say is the outline of the presentation was kind of clear. Like, you talked about how you wanted to proceed with your presentation. But some of the things I would add on the paper is there's for a non-technical audience, there's a lot of things that we might not understand. Right. So maybe just adding one page in the beginning that talks about all the acronyms, like what does ESBL mean? What does AMR mean? What is MDR? What does this One Health approach by WHO, right? WHO, what does the One Health approach talk about? Just briefly mentioning that in the beginning of the slide might just help the audience to understand what the paper is about. I also think you talked about this cluster analysis by dividing the into 3 different clusters, but I was not clear what was the outcome of that cluster analysis. Maybe you could go a little more in depth into that. Another thing is, so you found that one of the determinant of antimicrobial resistance would be ESBL, right? But that is just a correlation analysis. You just looked at a correlation between 2 variables. Maybe you can go one step further and look at perhaps do a regression analysis to look at what is the impact, does ESBL really affect AMR or not, by doing a regression analysis. Maybe the other thing is maybe also looking at the ESBL producers across different age of the patient. If you're looking at the human samples across the different age of the patients, was there any association between ESBL producer and age of the patients? That might be another thing that could be added. And also you might talk about policy implication, right? So we know that ESBL is a big problem that's causing antimicrobial resistance. So what kind of policies could be adopted? What does that mean in terms of policy implications? Those are some of the things I think could be added on this paper. I mean, this is more technical paper, right? So I think my suggestion is just to add more social dimension, like talk about policy implication, maybe add some go beyond correlation analysis and do a little more, right, to see the impact of Another thing could be like, looking at whether the ESBL is affecting adults and children similarly or not, right? So this ESBL bacteria, does it have a more profound effect on children than the adults? That could be an extended analysis.